Hola, comrades! Today's topic of interest, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Yes, we're finally doing the companion episode to the Mario Sunshine video that I made several weeks ago. Wind Waker withstood a slew of undeserved flack when it was released, much of which came from those who were disgruntled with its art style. In an age when gaming was striving to be taken seriously as an art form, and was, because of this, adhering to this grim pseudo-realism that had invaded cinema in the 90s and early 2000s, Wind Waker stood out. Back then, it was viewed as unwelcome. It was viewed as a traitor. Now it's viewed as a relief, or even as powerfully subversive. I never went along with the backlash. Part of that was because I was a kid when it was at its perigee. Part of that was because I adored the art style. It shaped my childhood relationship with video games, but I didn't appreciate the game as much then as I do now. I never got to the end as a kid. The first time I played, I was stuck at the Forsaken Fortress, wasting days attempting to escape the moblins. Then, I was stuck for an eternity at Tower of the Gods. After years, literal years, I was able to progress to the final dungeon and reach Puppet Ganon, but I lost to him repeatedly, so I never saw how the game ended until much later. Only then was the picture completed. I maintain that Puppet Ganon is the most difficult boss in a Zelda game. It's a shame that I was, for so long, unable to appreciate the fullness of this masterpiece, because the story it conveys is ultimately a poignant, profound one. This is a post-apocalyptic game, but it doesn't look like one. It's not morose or dour. The colors are bright and the islands are vibrant. The old land of Hyrule was long ago washed away. When Ganon returned, the people prayed for salvation, and instead, the gods, Din, Faeror, and Anew, flooded the land. Naught but the faintest of memories remain from that old civilization. The legend of Link was kept alive on the wind's breath on Outset Island, and because of that, young men were clothed in green tunics when they came of age. Among these young men is the Link of this game, an unassuming kid who would not have approached the swirling clamor of activity and chaos had his sister not been captured by a staunch ally of Ganon, a giant rock who calls himself the Helmarock King. The old magic of Hyrule exists. Hyrule Castle, which rests at the bottom of the ocean, has been protected by this magic. The King of Red Lions, the boat on which you sail, is the King of Hyrule. The pirate captain, Tetra, is secretly Princess Zelda, to the shock of both her and the younger version of me who played this game for the first time. However, this magic is not a source of salvation against the darkness. Rather, it's the opposite. It's the other half of the corruption that caused the darkness to regain power in the first place. At the end of the game, the King of Hyrule drowns himself, the remnants of Hyrule, and what was left of Ganondorf. He realizes that keeping Hyrule intact after its era had passed was a great and terrible and costly mistake, and he blames himself. The time has come for the old world to vanish, and for a new world to take its place. He implores Link and Zelda to discover a new world, and clarifies that this new world will not be Hyrule, but rather their land. It is this mission that leads Tetra and Link into direct confrontation with the demonic forces that serve as the primary villains of Phantom Hourglass, the sequel to The Wind Waker, and after the events of that game, they succeed and discover that land, which they then christen New Hyrule. This is where the third game of the Great Sea Trilogy, Spirit Tracks, takes place. Thus, Wind Waker is a game about the transition between eras. It's about the necessity for the old to recede in favor of the new. Hyrule was destroyed by the whims of the gods. This was cruel and cataclysmic. If we are to abide by the rules of apocalyptic fiction, that should be the end. That should be it. After all, isn't that the idea? Sure, there might be a few stranglers, a few hangers-on, a few survivors, but nothing more. The world is permanently damaged, and existence is but a shadow of what came before. But that's not the case here. For those who were wiped away by the floods, yes, those floods were the end. Civilization as it was known ended, but life went on and adapted to the new conditions. Gorons, the mountain-loving, rock-eating, lovable race that we've all come to know and adore, they became merchants. Kokori evolved into Koroks. New cultures like the avian Rito flourished. Death Mountain, the great imposing volcano of the past and the home of the Gorons, has become Dragon Roost Island, the home of the Rito. The underlying philosophy behind this is that the end of an age does not directly lead to the end of all things, and there is something comforting about that, even though that comfort does not extend to those directly affected by these tragedies. To clarify, let me put this in terms of the Industrial Revolution. The first factory workers in England, dragged from their farms by the enclosure movement, suffered in factories, working according to the whims of greedy industrialists who wanted to take as much labor as they can from them, who wanted to exploit them to the bone. They did not have weekends. They did not yet have decent working hours or safe working conditions. They made next to nothing. And yet, from a long-term perspective, we can look back on the Industrial Revolution and declare that life has not ended. Instead, it's gotten better. A lot better. Our lives aren't perfect, true, and material goods aren't everything, but who could truly say they'd be better off in the olden days without mass society? Who could say they'd be better off in the days when there were no electronics, and you had to sew your own clothes, and you only had one pair of socks, and the fastest way to get anywhere was by horse, and in all likelihood you would never leave the town you were raised in and die there and be buried next to your ancestors dating back 700 years. That would be horrible. This is similar. Fast forward 500 years past most post-apocalyptic futures, and there won't be massive resource shortages and morose despondence. Civilization will have been rebuilt. The zombies will have run out of bodies to eat, or the great pandemic will have run its course, or the nuclear radiation will have diminished somewhat. Will it be back to how it was before? No, of course not. When the Roman Empire collapsed, it was eventually not replaced by a new Roman Empire, but by a collection of centralized, strong European absolute monarchies, and it was on that foundation that Europe persisted until the revolutions that swept through Europe from 1789, the start of the French Revolution, to post-World War I destroyed the monarchies. When the apocalypse passes and civilization is rebuilt, will it be better or worse than it was? It can go either way. There's no guarantee that everything will get better, like was the case in the Industrial Revolution, but there's also no guarantee that nothing will improve and nothing will be close to the grandeur of what once was. Wisely, the Wind Waker refuses to adjudicate the superiority or inferiority of this new waterlogged land to the old Hyrule. That's not the point. The point is that without the systems that held the old order in place, there's more room for experimentation, more room for defining the future in terms appropriate to the new society. How appropriate that this game is about exploration, because on a larger scale, this is what the remaining peoples of this world have been attempting to do since the disaster. They've been exploring the ravaged world, carving out niches for themselves in it, and thriving. But this is not enough. Not nearly enough. Because of the flood, there is far less land. These islands dotting the sea are all that remain. How can a society comparable to that of Hyrule be founded and sustained if there's far less space on which to found it? This is why Link and Zelda departing for New Horizons is thematically a perfect conclusion. The main antagonist of the Wind Waker is not actually Ganondorf. It's the concept of clinging to the past. Ganondorf is guilty of this, but so is the King of Hyrule. They both want the old order to be restored, though they draw from different parts of that order. When the king makes a wish on the Triforce for his kingdom to be drowned, he is differentiating himself from Ganondorf, who refuses to acquiesce, leading to the climactic final boss fight. The message is evident. Those who cling to the decrepit old order must be defeated for the betterment of the world, while those who accept that the time of this old order has passed are to be venerated. With the old order no longer rigid, a new future must be sought. While it is tempting to look to the past in attempting to build that future, this impulse must be rigorously suppressed. Lack of turnover from the old world to the new is beneficial only from the viewpoint of those who believe that the new world is not that different from the old. But it is. A new approach is thus needed. Yes, it will be difficult, but the alternative is to dissolve into nothingness while pursuing plans that are no longer tenable. This is the ethos of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and I applaud it. We have no shortage of games about the immediate aftermath of the world's end. We don't have nearly enough contemplating the situation of what to do after the apocalypse is but a distant memory. We don't have nearly enough works that contemplate heroes who are trapped in a gulf between the faded glories of an ancient past and the uncertain, tenuous opportunities of a glimmering future. I love the use of wind imagery in this game. The wind has never played as prominent a role in a Zelda title. There's even a wind temple, and it is the last temple you visit before the final dungeon. This is because Link has in his possession the titular Wind Waker, a conductor's baton that gives him the power to control the wind. But why does the game choose to give him that? The obvious practical reason is that the game involves a surplus of sailing, and without the power to control the wind, sailing could be as tedious as, well, actual sailing. And from there, the choice of a conductor's baton is logical, as the conductor directs their orchestra, just like Link directs the wind. But the resonance of this choice goes further than that. Wind is a symbol of change and transition. The Studio Ghibli film The Wind Rises takes its name from a French poem that roughly translates as, "The wind is rising, we must try to live," a call for the film's main character, Jiro, an airplane inventor, to make the most of his creativity and rise above the challenges he faces. The first is that of not being able to become a pilot because of his poor eyesight. The second is that of an earthquake that wreaks fire and devastation all around him. And the final is that of the illness and eventual death of his beloved wife. In Wind Waker, Ganondorf references the wind continually in his surprisingly intimate, somber speech that he delivers before the climactic encounter with Link. He discusses how the wind in his native land carried only death, as opposed to the winds of Hyrule, which brought life and prosperity. This is not merely an elevated touch of rhetoric. Winds represent change, but these winds carry only death. There is no opportunity for them to carry anything else. They cannot bring change. And while Ganon cannot bring change either, preferring instead to cling to his anachronistic, autocratic model of the future, Link can and does. Having the power to control the wind physically means that he can sail more quickly, but symbolically, it means he can set the course for the future. It's a thoughtful detail that's not mentioned often enough, and it is another reason why I love this game. There is so much to unpack. I'm so glad the public finally came around on it. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more billowing content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that tempestuous stuff. Adios, scumbrats!